Okay, Burning Issy, Melvin Burgess, Chapter 3. Jeanette lived in Malkin Tower, an old half-blown down wooden building a few miles up from us towards Pendle Hill. Her grandmother was an old Demdike, the worst witch of them all. She often passed our house on the way to begging Clone and always stopped to ask for something. Jeanette's mother was a terrible-looking woman called Squinting Lizzie because of the way her two eyes stuck out of her head, one up, one down. Lizzie had a vicious temper, but it was the old Demdike we feared the most. She was blind as the night and so full of spite and misery it just spilled out of her like an old crock too full of water. She had been a witch for over 50 years and everyone had a tale to tell of how she'd cursed the animals or turned the milk or the beer sour. Over the years she had murdered maybe a dozen poor souls with her witchcraft, sometimes for no more than refusing a crust of bread. That's what people said at least. But I'll say this, that the devil never took care of his creatures. Demdike had a long life, but every day of it was spent in want. Nat always gave them something, not from fear, but because he pitied them. He said the tools of the beggars had always been pity, disgust and fear, and that talks of curses were just to help folk part with their money. He never believed what they could do, what they claimed. Nearly everyone felt obliged to refuse the witches from time to time when they came begging, just to show whose side they were on, and if Nat had pitied less and thought more of his own skin, he would have turned them away once or twice a year himself. Jeanette was a dangerous friend to have, dangerous for me and for Nat. I told myself that she was not a witch, not yet, and hoped for the best. She was my first friend. I spent my whole life doing the right thing. Surely to have one friend couldn't be all that bad, even if that friend was old Demdike's granddaughter. Poor Jeanette, she wasn't that much, but I loved her. Between hunger, cold and exhaustion, Jeanette was always suffering in some way. I stole pieces of bread and leftovers for her, which she gobbled up like a hungry little dog. Once I found her an old vest that was too small for me. When she took off her smock to put it on, I realised with shock that the smock was all she had against the frosty wind. She had pasty blue flesh marked with black bruises and scars and scabs, and you could count the little ribs sticking out. She saw me looking and covered herself up quickly, but it was a waste of time giving her clothes. The vest was gone the very next day, stolen by her sister Alison, and even though she had to rip it up to get it over her big head. We had both spent so much time on our own that neither of us really knew how to play together, but we did our best. I brought my doll along. It was a crude thing, but it had eyes, a nose and a face, and arms and legs, and like Janet's piece of stick. When she was allowed to hold this wonderful plaything, Jeanette was overjoyed, and when I told her to do something, such as put the baby to bed or give her a drink, she always did it as if I'd just had the cleverest idea in the whole world. Although we were the same age, she was so much smaller and simpler than I thought of her as a little sister. The thing Janet loved best was listening to tales about home. She couldn't hear enough of what Gil and Nat said to her and did, what we ate, what we fed to the pigs or the chickens, or how we did the housework, as if poor little cottage was heaven on earth. In exchange for these tales, she offered to whisper curses and charms to me. I remember what the priest had said and shook my head. I told her about my dream. I'm not going to that fire, not if I can help it, I told her. Jeanette looked forward to becoming a witch because she thought the others would stop being cruel to her. But she was miserable, that she had to go and burn in hell rather than to heaven with the Christian folk. It would be nice to have someone friendly down there with me, she told me wistfully. She'd offered to ask Demdike about my dream. She was in awe of Demdike, who seemed to know everything, but I told her not to. I added to my prayers after that. Neither of us wanted to go to hell and burn forever, but it seemed that old Demdike and my dreams were both heading that way. He was about then Gil began to ask questions. Gil was fascinated by any kind of magic. He was always trying out brews and charms. When the witches came begging and Nat was out, Gil offered them a piece of bread in return for a charm, and they always gave him one. He pestered them for more, and old Demdike told him to meet her at Melkin Tower and she'd show him. But although he was bold enough at home, he daren't go there. Gil was a fool to himself. For one thing, no one would use him as their cunning man if he got a name as a witch. For another, he was putting us all in danger. Nat begged him and beat him for it, but never enough to make him stop. I put up a show of not wanting to tell him. Jeanette asked me not to tell anyone about us, but he was a big brother to me and I wanted to impress him, even if I knew it was a stupid thing to do. The next time I went across the moor to meet Jeanette, Gil came with me. I can remember how she looked and how I appeared over the lip of the little valley above the stream. Her thin white face, her big black eyes, looking over my shoulder at Gil coming down after me. No sooner had I made a friend than I betrayed her. I knew it would never be the same again between us. Witch's child, said Gil, tell me some spells. Jeanette whispered her charms fearfully as she were reciting the most awful secrets, but Gil was disappointed. He scoffed that every baby knew these silly old rhymes, and that he thought Jeanette was just trying to make a fool of him. He was sulky about it, but I noticed he wasn't bold enough to bully her. Instead, he begged to take her with him and hide in the house next time when there was magic being made. Jeanette found it hard to believe that anyone would want to go near such secrets, but Gil insisted. She looked at me. I shrugged. Why not, if he wants to, I said. The truth was, despite my fear, despite Parson Holden, despite hellfire, I was curious too. End of chapter 3.